Just a little disclaimer before we get started. I'm currently a psychology student at university, but by no means an expert in the specific field of attachment. It is quite socially sensitive, so take what I say relating to it with a pinch of salt and do your own research if you're interested to know more about the things I'll discuss. With that said, I hope you enjoy the video. The Sonic series has been the host of such a diverse and relatable cast of characters, from the core crew comprising of Team Sonic, Amy, and even Shadow, to the vicious villains including the likes of Mephiles, Metal Sonic, and Black Doom. There's something to be said about their character interactions, which pave the way for a deeper understanding of their experiences and motivations, and even a deeper understanding of ourselves. To that end, the pair of characters who I think give us some of the most unique and valuable insight into these are Sage and Eggman, the former still being a relatively new character in the franchise with the release of Sonic Frontiers. Sage allows for a more three-dimensional perspective on Eggman's character, while also demonstrating her importance to her familial relationship with the Mad Doctor. She even brings an aspect of humanity into his evil persona, bringing to light a new side to Eggman that we previously haven't seen. If you're intrigued about this and his familial bond with Sage, you've come to the right video. We'll first analyse Sage and Eggman's interactions and Egg Memos during the events of Frontiers in terms of their contribution to the relationship, before looking more closely at how certain psychological theories are conveyed within Sage and Eggman's dynamic. Without further ado, let's start with the characters' appearances in Frontiers.
Uploading AI program now.
It's all coming online. The ancient secrets will be mine. Status report. Answer me!
Simulations complete. Executing protective initiative.
What? No! No!
It might not seem like we can gather a lot from this very first cutscene, but it in fact instantly sets up and points to Sage's character motivation, which will become more apparent as we progress through the game. The main thing to talk about here is the fact that even before Sage becomes a corporeal and more or less tangible figure, one of her very first actions is to pull Eggman into cyberspace to protect him once detecting the threat of the Starfall Islands' defenses and also the looming threat of the end. But I know what you're thinking. As a loyal servant of the Eggman Empire, isn't protecting her master part of Sage's programming anyway? That's nothing out of the ordinary. What I would say to that is, yes, that's very true. It's not out of the ordinary. But it's nonetheless a very important starting point for the development of that father-daughter relationship, because it has to start from a point where at least one person demonstrates actions highlighting concern for the other. The fact that Sage is fundamentally an AI means that she would just be expressing this concern differently compared to Eggman or even compared to Sonic towards his friends, for example. So, while we might not have figured it out on the first playthrough yet, this cutscene establishes Sage's primary directive for the rest of the game, protecting Eggman at all costs. Even if she thinks initially that love is an emotional status too vague and varied in its definition. However, we're going to see in the next scene that Sage's loyalty to Eggman will be rewarded, and this will have profound implications for the both of them going forward.
Keep tabs on the hedgehog. I want constant updates.
Yes, sir.
And keep looking for a way to get me out of here!
I am evaluating all safe options.
Keep up the good work, Sage.
Thank you, Doctor.
When was the last time we saw Eggman genuinely praising his underlings in the main series? I can only really recall how much Orbot and Cubot have been scolded by him, at least during the Meta era. But anyway, this scene is significant because, if I'm not mistaken, Sage is the first of Eggman's creations to flawlessly and consistently execute orders without a hitch. Of course, Sage's job well done is met with approval from Eggman, a clear example of a phenomenon in psychology called positive reinforcement. You may have heard of this, as it comes from one of the most well-known experiments carried out by psychologist B.F. Skinner. He was specifically a behaviorist who applied all his animal findings to humans. I'm not going to go into every little detail about his experiment, but I'll do my best to summarize. Skinner demonstrated that rats were more likely to repeat behavior that was rewarded, or in his words, positively reinforced. For example, the rats were more likely to repeat pulling a lever which caused food to be dispensed from nearby. Alternatively, the rats would pull the lever to stop hearing some obnoxious sounds, demonstrating negative reinforcement, as the behavior removes an unpleasant stimulus. Punishment would have happened if the rats got electrocuted after pulling the lever, making it unlikely they would do it again. Now, as I'm sure you might have guessed, Sage's behavior is being positively reinforced by Eggman. If we're going off what Skinner found, we would expect Sage to continue her optimal performance with the conscious or subconscious expectation that she would keep getting praise from Eggman. This is the first instance of Sage's humanity developing, because while computers and AI may look for feedback in the form of human input, they don't then go on to perform at optimal levels with the expectation that they'll get a reward. They'll just do their task anyway. Sage differs from these generic computers and AI since it becomes clearer as we progress through the game that she desires Eggman's admiration, which will eventually turn into fatherly love. Though we'll see that in the next cutscene, it's not gonna be smooth sailing.
I am extending the range of my control, but I can still only command a few of the Ancient's relics at a time.
Commendable. But what about finding me a way out of this digital dimension?
I have run 1,700,050 simulations. There is no scenario to safely remove you from cyberspace.
Unacceptable. Keep looking. Make it your number one priority.
But keeping you safe is my priority.
So now there's a mix of both positive reinforcement and punishment going on here. Eggman has told Sage that her efforts in extending her reach of control over the Starfall Islands' technology is commendable. But once she's admitted that she can't safely get Eggman out of cyberspace, her efforts are immediately disregarded and labelled as unacceptable. Ouch. We could say that this blow is the second factor that made Sage become determined to win over Eggman's affection, with her programming being the foundations of this desire. And it makes sense, because she argues that her priority is keeping Eggman safe. And even in a later cutscene on Ares Island, Sage refers to Eggman as father for the first time, when telling Sonic that the doctor was right about the hedgehog being reckless and destructive. showing that she's becoming more protective of her soon-to-be dad. Let's next take a look at how Eggman and Sage are both starting to share mutual familial love for each other.
Lost count of how many times you've saved me from the hazards here.
It is my function. I live to serve.
You've exceeded your function. I'm very impressed with you, Sage. No, I'm proud of you.
While this is just another instance of Sage saving Eggman from a threat, I think it's very important that we pay very close attention to the Doctor's language in this scene when thanking Sage for the rescue. He said that she exceeded her function and told her that he wasn't just impressed with her, but also proud of her. You would typically hear of parents saying that they're proud of their kids, and it means the world to them to know that their older role models appreciate what they've achieved. So this scene definitely highlights that it's not just Sage developing familial feelings, but also Eggman. And it's being reciprocated between them, so that it's not just one-sided. The feelings are definitely becoming mutual now, and as I'll explain with a psychological theory later, this is paramount to the father-daughter relationship. It's become clear how much Eggman and Sage both mean to each other, and I think their ending cutscene, The Final Horizon, perfectly illustrates this. I won't say anything else about it, and I'll just let it speak for itself, marking the end of our formal analysis of their interactions in the main game.
You did well, Sage. It's time to head home, dear daughter.
Home. I like the sound of that. Father.
Now, I know the completionists out there will want me to cover what's said in the Egg Memos. It's your lucky day, since that's exactly what I'm going to do. This part will be quite brief, but I'll start it off by saying that despite the fact that the Egg Memos are not part of Frontiers' main narrative and are only restricted to being cool collectibles in Big's mini fishing game, they give so much more depth and nuance to the development of Eggman and Sage's bond. I think they should have found their way into the main parts of the game somehow, because a lot of what Eggman says about Sage really contributes to his character, and even may hint at the fact that he felt neglected during his childhood, which is an important factor to consider when talking about potentially positive and negative contributions to relationships in general. Roughly starting from Memos 12 to 13, Eggman goes from calling Sage an it to calling her a she, and in Memo 16, he only just realizes that he's acquired this habit. I think even more crucially, the next memo right afterwards indicates the complicated reality of the Robotnik family, where Eggman wonders if Maria was anything like Sage. I'll let you have a listen.
I never really knew my cousin Maria. Everyone spoke of her like she was very special. All that love for someone who was gone when I was right there. But I have to wonder, back then, was she anything like Sage is now?
Eggman has clearly been yearning for familial connections for longer than we imagined. From finding out his grandfather, his childhood hero, was driven to insanity due to the very scientific prowess he aims to achieve, to mourning the sweet cousin and potentially even parents that he never got to meet. Eggman's bond with Sage becomes incredibly important to end his decades-long cycle of immense loneliness. And I'd say that Memo 19 adds another deep layer to all this.
Who says I can't create life, huh? Just a bunch of proteins bumping together, anyone can do that. A true genius does it with code and electrons. And if I did create life, she would be brilliant and loyal and perfectly effective. And you know why? Because her dad is a genius, that's why.
So Eggman describes how he's very confident that he can create life with code and electrons, but I want to draw your attention to how he phrases certain sentences here. He makes it seem like he's denying his desire for family, saying that they would be loyal and effective instead of should. I think we also need to note how Eggman chooses to specify that this life he's wishing to create perfectly would be a she. Perhaps having something to do with him making comparisons between Maria and Sage, and suggesting his desire for someone as supposedly caring as Maria to have as a tangible family member. Admittedly, this is sounding just as tragic as Shadow's backstory, and heck, we could also tie him to all of this if we had the time to. But nonetheless, I think the Egg Memos provide such an interesting way to look at the importance of Sage's familial love for Eggman. They really add to the bigger picture. So with most of their relationship covered in Sonic Frontiers, it's now time to dive a bit deeper into the complexity and start talking about how this familial bond actually mirrors a lot of psychological theories relating to attachment. The first theory of attachment we'll discuss is the monotropic theory. It was devised by a psychoanalyst called John Bowlby, and it explains how infants form a relationship to their first attachment figure. There are a few parts to the theory that can't really apply to Sage though, given she's technically not a human infant, but there's still a lot of things we can infer about Sage from it. Bowlby puts forward the idea that attachment is innate due to infants being biologically programmed to form relationships. This sort of relates to Sage in that we know that Eggman compiled her AI code, but what has probably been slipped under the rug is that Eggman may have programmed Sage's likeness, capabilities, and machine learning with the subconscious expectation that she would form a close bond with him, hence why she does end up becoming Eggman's daughter through their interactions. But Bowlby would ask, why? When Sage has had plenty of interactions with Sonic and his friends too. Well, it's explained that infants attach to only one particular caregiver of special importance to their emotional development, and Bowlby calls this caregiver the monotropic figure, or the mother, though they're not necessarily the biological mother or even a woman at all. Now, Eggman definitely fits the bill on that front. In Egg Memo 16, he describes Sage to be an adorable and very personable program. You would think upon initially hearing this that it's quite out of place for someone as tyrannical as Eggman to think that anything is adorable and personable. But as Bowlby would agree, this might be due to Sage's social releases, particularly her big eyes and small nose that a caregiver like Eggman would find innately cute. This is meant to encourage him in giving Sage love and attention in order to ensure the survival of his legacy. Or genes, as the theory states for us. This then also paves the way for the reciprocal process of exchanging mutual feelings for one another. The last aspect of Bowlby's theory that we'll touch on is the idea of Sage's internal working model. She isn't just confined to the expanse of cyberspace, but is able to freely enter and exit it however she pleases. This leads her to be able to closely observe Sonic and his friends' own familial relationships between each other, and I think seeing Sonic and Tails' brotherly bond in action on Chaos Island specifically is what significantly shapes Sage's internal working model the most.
Hey, little bro. Feeling better?
Yeah, this whole experience gave me a kind of clarity. When this is all over, I think I need to go it alone for a while. I can't grow into my full potential if I always fall back on you. If that's okay.
You're free to go your own way. I guess you just grew up on me a little faster than I expected.
Are you saying I outpaced you?
Yeah, don't push it. It's gonna take some getting used to, but here's to you reaching new heights, partner.
Such a beautiful friendship. A family born of love and not genetics. Everything I want. I wish I'd never seen this. It was so much easier accepting the future when they were simply enemies.
As we can gather from this, Sage's internal working model has been formed from observing what other people's relationships are like. A mental representation of these is created for her, serving as an expectation of what her bond with Eggman and what her future relationships should be like. This means that a faulty internal working model, created from a first relationship involving poor treatment, may lead to the individual forming poor quality relationships in the future, where they expect such treatment from others and or treat others in a similar way. But I don't think we should worry about Eggman mistreating Sage, though the idea that she would act in purposefully evil ways like her father makes no sense if we consider that, according to Bowlby, Sage would do this because of poor treatment from Eggman. I guess ultimately we could just chalk it up to Eggman being a great evil role model who Sage looks up to. Let's move on to the second theory of attachment, which considers the different stages proposed by Schaffer and Emerson. Reminding ourselves that Sage isn't a human infant is gonna be a bit of a stretch with how we try to apply these stages to her. Trust me though, there is some semblance here. It may just be the case that Sage moves through these stages significantly faster than the theory states. The first stage, the asocial stage, begins when a child is a few weeks old. They recognize and form bonds with their immediate carers, while showing preference for familiar adults since they can better tend to the child's needs, though the child wouldn't mind being in the company of humans other than their caregivers. However, this doesn't quite accurately describe Sage, since her initial antagonism against Sonic and his friends had ridden alongside her preference for spending time with Eggman in cyberspace. The indiscriminate stage comes second, and a child would be about 2 to 7 months old. They would display more observable social behavior and a preference for interacting with people rather than inanimate objects. We can definitely see how this is reflected in Sage, given that towards the endgame of Frontiers, She's willing to team up with Sonic and Co. to defeat the End, and just in general, she seems to be interested in gaining a better understanding of what love is through further interactions with people while still preferring Eggman's company. The third stage is the specific stage. A child would roughly be 7 months old and begins to feel anxious when surrounded by strangers and separated from their primary attachment figure. Now, I know you might be thinking, Sage doesn't demonstrate any of this, surely? Well, we can look to the original ending of Frontiers as a potential example of this separation anxiety, where Sage tells Eggman that in order for Supersonic to have a chance at taking out the End, she must leave Eggman's side and fight in space as well. We see from her facial expressions, body language, and pauses in her sentences, she's visibly distraught at the thought of leaving her father. The final and fourth stage is the multiple stage, usually transitioned into once a child reaches about a year old. As the name suggests, the child would begin to form multiple attachments with other people with whom they regularly spend time. While we haven't seen this in canon for Sage just yet, we can probably gather that her multiple attachments would involve her brothers Orbot, Cubot, and Mesosonic, the characters that Eggman would inevitably introduce Sage to as her family. Alright, let's shake things up a bit and learn about attachment types before we dig up some evidence to help us come to a conclusion about which type Sage would be. Basically, a researcher called Ainsworth carried out observational studies with infants and their caregivers before she came up with the following 3 types of attachment. Secure attachment with the caregiver is characterized by an infant happily exploring an unfamiliar environment while regularly relying on the comfort of the caregiver as a supportive base. This infant would show moderate separation and stranger anxiety, and upon reunion with the caregiver after they have shortly been away, the infant would accept comfort from their caregiver. Insecure avoidant attachment is demonstrated by an infant freely exploring a new environment, but they don't seek out their caregiver as a secure base. There would also be almost no attention paid when the caregiver leaves, and little contact would be made upon the caregiver's return. An infant in this stage would have little to no stranger anxiety and would ignore comfort provided by the caregiver. Now, the insecure resistant attachment type is also an interesting one. Infants aren't likely to want to explore a new environment. They seek greater proximity to their caregiver, they show immense separation and stranger anxieties, yet they reject comfort from the caregiver upon their return. So I think the most likely of Ainsworth's types that Sage's attachment with Eggman ends up being is a secure attachment. In Sonic Frontiers, Sage constantly roams the Starfall Islands to observe Sonic and his friends without Eggman's company, and returns to him in cyberspace every so often. And again, her leave of Eggman to fight with Supersonic in the original ending implies her moderate separation anxiety. In terms of her potential stranger anxiety, well, it seemed pretty tamed, considering Sage didn't like surrounding herself with Sonic and Co. until she got to know them better as they became less like strangers and more like acquaintances. And of course, Sage's need for comfort from Eggman after the Final Horizon ending, and just in general, brings it all together. But having now gone through all these psychological theories, I feel I need to return to what I said in the disclaimer. These theories aren't gospel, they just reflect what researchers have found in their studies. And even then, not all of them have found the same things, since there are usually a lot of flaws with these kinds of studies on children's attachments to caregivers. There are usually a lot of other factors that aren't always considered, like culture, suitability of explanations to certain groups of people, or lack thereof, the fact that no child is destined to behave in the exact same way, etc. Still, it's been really fun for me to take this deep dive into the possible inner workings of Sage and Eggman's new familial bond. Like I've mentioned earlier, all these nuances that we might have missed in Sonic Frontiers just bring so much more meaning to this character dynamic, and really starts to get you feeling some sympathy for Eggman. Well, that's the case for me anyway. So yeah, I hope you got some value out of this video and enjoyed going through this analysis with me. I just find it so interesting how so many things about the Sonic characters can remain unseen even though they're right there in front of us. But I suppose that's a testament to how good Ian Flynn's writing for the dialogue is. If Sage ever returns for a mainline Sonic game, which seems pretty likely with the community discussion about a potential Frontier sequel, I for one can't wait to see what Flynn does with her and Eggman's characters, as well as their familial relationship. The Doctor now has a loving daughter who's done him proud, and thanks to the rewrite of the original ending to Frontiers, Sage can finally do what she's always wanted to. She can finally go home. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking with me to the end. If you've enjoyed this, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. I'm going to try and get out weekly uploads, so expect some more coverage on the psychology of Sonic characters, but also some Sonic character videos where I explain more of my opinions. Anyways, thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. Take care, everyone.